Called Solid Core. How many people have been to Solid Core? Yay, that's great. Ironically, what we do at Solid Core is work your muscles to failure. Like, that's the whole point. So it's a little bit fitting in that way. But there is a whole lot more to my story that I'd like to share with you guys today, and hopefully you see some relevance in my journey and in yours, because failure is a big deal, right? Like, there are many things we don't do in our life because we're so afraid if it doesn't work out. And I'd like to share some of my examples and some of my my choices that I've made in my life that have to do with failure. So to give you a little history and background about me, I grew up in North Dakota. Had a really great upbringing there, right? It's really easy being a kid in North Dakota. You don't have to worry about safety. You don't have to worry about locking your doors at night. Like, there's kids everywhere. I thought every kid grew up the same way that I did, with a bike and a big yard and a happy family, and that was my reality. And I had like a ridiculous relationship with my dad, who's just my person, right? He was my biggest fan, or is my biggest fan, would drive 4 hours to watch me play a game of basketball, just kind of always rooting for me. And there are people in our lives that we can't explain how much we love them, and my dad has this special place in my heart for reasons that I really can't really understand, more so than any other person. My mom, my brother, my sister, my friends. And from the early age of 12, I had my entire life figured out, right? I used to keep this box underneath my bed, and I would put things in this box that were going to represent my life when I got older. So I had these pictures of this huge white house with a white picket fence and green shutters, pictures of these women dressed in suits living and working in New York City, pictures of this guy, this one particular guy who was very tall, very dark, and very handsome, who was supposed to be my husband, but I can't seem to date men who are taller than 5'10", so I need to let that go. And that was going to be my life when I got older. It was just going to be that easy for me, that I was going to grow up, have this amazing job, this amazing house, these 2.2 kids, this dog, and that was going to be my life, no problem. But when I was 16 years old, I really got a hard dose of reality of what my dad's life was like and how it changed everything about my view on him and my life and what I thought was real. So I was 16, I was sitting home, it was the summer before my sophomore year in high school, and my dad came home from work early. He sold insurance, and he still sells insurance today. So it's 3 o'clock on a Friday. My mom was home because she's a teacher, and he came home asking if me and my brother and sister could leave for a couple hours so we could talk to mom. And I was like, this is weird, right? My dad's not the let's sit down and have a long conversation type of guy, and we've never had to leave the house before, right? Something was obviously wrong. So I was probably the most apprehensive, really nervous. We left, we all went to our friend's house, and I was the first one to come back, and my mom wasn't there. My dad was sitting upstairs looking somber, embarrassed, very unsure of himself, and I, of course, asked him what's going on, and that's the day that I learned my dad was a gambling addict. And for the past couple years of his life, my dad had been cleverly, spending money, going to the casinos, money that we didn't have as a family, and it got to a point, as most addictions do, right, they win. And my dad owed a lot of people a lot of money that we just didn't have, and he finally had to come clean about it, right? So unfortunately, that wasn't my dad's first introduction or experience with addiction. He went through drug and alcohol recovery when I was a little kid. I've never seen my dad drink or do drugs. I've frankly never even seen him be tempted by any of those activities. So for me, this is all brand new, right? I don't really understand what's going on. I know it's not great, but it's not as piercing for me as it was for my mom, who for years of her life, saw my dad as somebody who is lying, cheating, being irresponsible, right? Addiction causes people to do things that don't bring out the best in you. And for years, she went through that. Unfortunately, my dad, made it through that first step with those addictions and never has looked back. But, this one for her, money is like my mom's Achilles heel, and she worked so hard to save for our college educations, and my dad violated that and went and took all of this money out of the bank and spent it, and it's gone. And my mom kicked my dad out of the house that day. For a 16-year-old kid who loves her dad more than life and thinks the world is all about her, right? I was really pissed off. Like, what do you mean dad's not gonna live here anymore? You know, like, you guys are married and you fix things and it's just money. And I couldn't begin to comprehend my mom's decision to be like, we're not gonna be married anymore. We're not gonna have this relationship anymore, and your dad's not gonna live here anymore. It didn't make any sense, right? So I was really angry, and I spent the next 3 years pushing that resentment toward her. It wasn't my dad's fault. My dad didn't do anything wrong. He screwed up. But my mom made the decision to split apart my family, my perfect family, which represented my life, and I didn't do a very good job of handling that. I didn't have a great relationship with her. I spent those years trying to avoid her, trying to fix my dad at the same time, right? I didn't get addiction as a 16-year-old the way that I understand it now, and I just didn't understand why my dad couldn't stop, right? Why don't you stop going to the casino? Do you not remember the last time of going to the casino and losing all of that money? And his answer was no. No. You don't think about those things, just like when an addict who's got a drug problem doesn't think about the last time they got high and ruined and wrecked their car, right? You just think about the high. And my dad would constantly be thinking about what he's going to do with the money when he, wins and when he, finally hits the jackpot. My dad, mind you, is not a bad person. He will give you everything of what he doesn't have, and he's probably the most benevolent guy I've ever met in my life. But, for, again, my mom and myself not understanding addiction, it's like, who is this bad person who ruined our family, who took all this money? And that was just not where his mindset was. However, it's really difficult to love somebody who's an addict. I saw my dad start lying to me. I saw him take 3 steps forward, only to take 5 steps back. I saw the irresponsibility. I saw the deception. And fortunately for me at that time is when I found running. And running made me feel like I could fly. I needed something to do with all of this negative energy that I had inside me directed toward my dad at this point now and my family. And I just felt really inadequate, right? Like, Bismarck, North Dakota is where I grew up, and it's not the metropolis you might think it is. But people knew my business. Everybody knew that my dad was a gambling addict and my parents didn't live together, and it made me uncomfortable. And it didn't fit in. That picture did not fit in my box, right? So I was trying everything I possibly could to compensate: school, sports, anything, how I looked. Everything else had to be perfect. And running became this amazing outlet for me where, again, it made me feel like I could fly. The lessons that you learn from that sport are real, and they are so applicable to other things, right? You have to, when you go for a run, you have no choice but to take things 1 step at a time. You cannot go out and run 2 miles or run 10 miles and do the first one and the last one, right? That's 2 miles. You have to do all of the hard work in between to get to the end. And there are times when you're out on a run, and still, I've been a runner for, almost 20 years, and you're looking at this huge hill in front of you and like, oh my God, I'm really tired. I don't want to go up that hill. Maybe I'll just turn around. I've already ran 5 miles. Like, no one else is out here running. It's Saturday morning. Like, that's good enough. I'll go left, I'll go right. There's no need for me to push myself further to go up that hill, right? We carry around these excuses that we put in our pockets that are really convenient for us to pull out when necessary, and we do that in life too. And it taught me that, maybe if I just get up this hill, that there's going to be a downward hill, right, a little bit easier. There's going to be a flatter road with less pothills, but I have to be willing to go up the hill and see if that's actually the case. So I decided that I was going to go get everything that was in my box, and if I could just get to this place with this husband, these kids, this job, this house, that my life would be okay, and that's where my happiness lied, that I almost had to push all those things away from my family, my dad, those choices which were not mine, and I was motivated by this idea of perfection. So that's what I did, right? I started going a million miles a minute. I went to college. I graduated early with 2 degrees. I went to grad school, graduated early there. And I was on this mission to get to this place so I could finally be happy, right? So 24 years old, I moved to Philadelphia, which was not in my box. However, there was a job opportunity there to rebuild and help this organization create a new brand for itself, which was very exciting for me. And from the ages of 24 to 26, I had no fucking clue. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. So on camera, you can edit that out, right? Okay. Who frankly I was. All these things that I thought that I wanted so badly didn't represent myself anymore. And I was so hungry for for purpose and for passion and for happiness. I spent so much time by myself. I didn't have really any friends, I kid you not, from those ages because I didn't know who I was. And if you're not comfortable with who you are, how can you build a friendship or a relationship? And it was a really lonely process for me. And I felt like I was just lost, and I was committed. I was in that place where I'm like, can someone just tell me what to do with my life and how I can be happy, and I'll do it. Like, I'm looking under rocks. I'm like really ready, and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. So I did the smartest thing that I could think of, and I quit my job. I quit my job because I thought if I don't have any other option, I will be able to make a decision, right? Like when you quit your job or you take away something that gives you security, it's amazing what happens. You're forced to figure it out. So I quit my job, and running for me was the only stable thing and the consistent thing in my life that I was so sure of, right? I knew that I was a runner. I knew that I loved how I felt when I was running. And in May of 2007, I was on one of my morning runs, which went by the local homeless shelter, which was not even 3 blocks away from my apartment in Philly. And I had ran by this homeless shelter literally hundreds of times. I had to walk by the shelter to get to work. And if the shelter's on this side, I'm walking on this side with earphones in, listening to my music, and not paying attention to those guys, because what do I have in common with those guys, right? But in May of 2007, these jovial group of guys waved at me, and I saw them, and I waved back. I have good Midwestern values, so if you're going to say good morning to me, I'll say good morning back to you. And the next day, they were there again, and we started to build this really fun rapport where, they would emulate me running by them, and they would ask me if all I do is run all day, and I would ask them if all they do there is stand all day. And it was really easy for me to talk to them like that because they reminded me so much of my dad, who is, sarcastic and fun and friendly and will talk to strangers, but maybe a little rough around the edges. And after a couple weeks of this, I had this idea, why am I just running by these guys and leaving them there? Here I am moving my life forward physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, right? And I'm leaving these guys on the corner. Why don't I run with them? Running doesn't discriminate, doesn't care if you're black or you're white or you're rich or you're poor, if you're a 16-year-old messed up kid. I didn't think it mattered if you were homeless or not. So, cool, this makes sense. I'm going to start a running club. And I called the shelter and asked to talk to the director and told them my name and my experience with these guys. And the director tries to think of the nicest way to tell me that homeless people don't run. But if you want to come in, volunteer in the shelter, that, totally fine with that. And I didn't want to do that. I was fortunately, and still am a little bit persistent, and convinced him to at least ask the guys if anybody wanted to do it, and I would take care of everything else. So he tells me not to get my hopes up, but that he would at least check with them. So about a week and a half later, I get an email from this guy with the names of 9 guys and their shoe sizes saying, these guys want to run. I'm super excited. I send an email to anybody. I have an email address for anybody. One of you guys might have got one actually. And I'm asking for old shoes, for clothes. If you don't have those things, can you send me some money so I can go buy this stuff? And literally dozens of shoes came into my apartment, and it was awesome, right? People were sending in all kinds of things because I was going to start the first homeless running club in Philadelphia. Well, right around this same time, I had been interviewing for other jobs, right? I've got to pay my bills and needed something else to do, and I got approached by Comcast to go work for them in their government affairs department. I've never been in the corporate world before, and this was a big job with a lot of money and crazy benefits. I've never been in, again, I was always in the nonprofit world, so all this stuff was new to me, and they called me with this offer, and it was pretty unbelievable. And there was part of me that thought, man, if there's any ounce of me that wants this life that's in that box underneath my bed, this is how I get it, right? So I took the job. And I asked them for 5 weeks if I could just get this running club stabilized and up and going, because I was going to have to do so much traveling. And fortunately, they said yes. So I have now 5 weeks to get this thing going, get people involved, and I go up to the shelter. It actually was a room like this. It was a chapel in the shelter at the end of June to meet the guys for the first time. They hadn't met me before. The director was very clear. He did not want to tell them that some young blonde girl wants to come run with these guys. And so I walk in the room, and some guys are looking at me cockeyed and crossing their arms and like, very curious, and some guys are winking at me, like asking me for my number, and it was I had to like neutralize the room, right? And I opened up about my dad and my love for my dad and my love for running and my relationship with the guys outside, and I kid you not, I really felt like I had found my people. And for 2 years of not having people in my life in a real way, like the emotional connection to these guys was just, I was starved for it and I didn't even realize it. So not the most important thing that happened that night was not giving these guys shoes or clothes, which they all got, brand new shoes. I didn't even give them old shoes. I wanted to make sure they had the right equipment to start their new running career. But I asked them to sign something. I asked them to sign the Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission, which was the name of the shelter, this running club dedication contract. The name's a little bit cooler now, huh? And so this contract said that if you want to join the running club, which was all it was ever supposed to be, that you need to show up 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 a.m. And you have to be on time, and you need to come with a positive attitude, and you need to support your teammates. I didn't look at these guys and be like, I get it, you're homeless, right? Like, you're not going to be able to make it every day. And you live in a shelter, I bet it's not easy to sleep in here, so you're probably going to be late, but can you try not to be too late? That would be great. Here I am, a stranger, absolute stranger to these guys, and I'm looking at them and expecting pure perfection, right? Telling them that they're capable of pure perfection. And you could feel that these guys hadn't been looked at like that in a really long time, if ever, in their lives. So every one of these guys signed this piece of paper, I signed it too, and we had our first run together on July 3rd. Of 2007, and I had media contacts. That was kind of my background. I wanted to get the word out. I've got to go take this job. I have to get people involved. Thought it was a cute story, so I call up my contacts in the press and I tell them what's going on, and they have the same reaction that the director did. There's no way this is happening. Homeless people don't run, right? Like, this doesn't even make any sense. There's this unfortunate stigma about those who are homeless, that they're dirty, that they're lazy. Aren't they drinking all day? Like, aren't you just going to make them hungrier if you make them run? Aren't they dangerous? Are you scared? And then there's this elitism about the sport of running, right? If you guys are a runner, or you know somebody who's a runner, you or that person is probably a little motivated, right? Self-disciplined, focused, ambitious, little anal maybe, type A. So like these things just did not work. That's not somebody who's homeless, so how do these two things go together? So I show up that morning, I'm early, the guys are already out there, warming up the best they know how, jumping up and down, and all of the press, every single news station and newspaper outlet is like on the corner having to know the burning answer to their question on why these guys are running. What's in this for them? It doesn't make any sense. So they go over and start talking to these guys, and they ask them the question, and they get the response just like you and I would give, right? Oh man, I want to see if I can get healthy. I'm getting older. I got to take care of my body. I wanted to meet some new people. I thought this might be fun. I wanted to get outside a little bit more. Answers that anyone in this room would give for doing something new. And you could just feel the humanization happen in these reporters and like, oh my God, why did I think that just because these people are currently homeless, that they're not people and don't have the same emotions that we have. So all these stories start to be written about this unlikely group of runners leaving from the corner of 13th and Vine in Philly 3 days a week, and people start calling and emailing, and this group of these guys and me starts to grow to 20 to 25 people, and there are true friendships being born, right? But these group of people on the surface have nothing in common, right? Our ages were way different, the color of our skin, our religions, our jail time, our drug use, you name it, right? Like, these people should not have been at the same place at the same time on purpose because of the commonalities weren't there. But we did now have something in common, and that was we are all runners, right? You couldn't tell which one of us, when we were running down the street, which one of us was homeless, which one of us was currently struggling with an addiction, which one of us is whatever, had a divorced parents as kids, and all you could tell was who's the fastest, and all you could tell was about your character, right? And that was what really connected us, and we found other things that made us laugh, movies we like, troubles that we're going through, and there was real friendships and real connections forming. Over those next couple of weeks, 2 things happened that were so simple, but really helped me realize that this could be something pretty amazing, and it could be bigger than just this group of guys and me on this corner and these other people running every, 3 days a week. The first one was that these guys were showing up every day, and they actually were on time. And I learned through my dad the hard way that you can't force anybody, especially a grown man, to do anything because you want them to, right? Change is voluntary. 100%. If you don't want to do it, it's not going to happen. Nobody can make you do it. The second one was the reaction that I would get from these guys when I would track their miles on a poster board, right? Their names on the left, the numbers at the top, and at the end of each one, I'd take a marker next to their name and color in the miles for that distance. It was cumulative from the days before. And these guys would just like hover, pushing each other behind my shoulders to get the best spot, to watch me take that marker next to their name and give them credit for the work that they did. And it's those moments that help me understand that I have everything in common with these guys. I have everything in common with you people in this room, in that we want the same thing. Emotionally, right, we're all looking to be loved, noticed, appreciated, valued, cared for, recognized. We look for it in our jobs, and we look for it in our friendships and our relationships. If we don't get those things out of our jobs, friendships, and relationships, we find new jobs, we find new friends, we find new relationships. It's as simple as that. You know, think if you've ever quit a job before. It's probably because of your boss, right, or how that environment made you feel. And that was so apparent that these guys didn't have that. They didn't have that community. They didn't have that experience, and no one was making them feel good about themselves. So this vision starts to form that, oh my God, what if we can change these guys' identity into somebody who looks at themselves as homeless, into somebody who sees themselves as a runner, a teammate, a friend, reliable, responsible, disciplined, focused, and if we can change somebody's identity, can we change the direction of their life? It's a big question. Makes sense though, right? I mean, how else do you make change if you don't love yourself and get excited about your capabilities and who you are? So I start to talk to anybody who will listen to me about not taking this job and building this organization, which could start in Philly and it could grow into multiple cities, and we could build real programming behind it with life coaching and really work on emotional transformation first before we help these guys get jobs and homes. And there's no other way that you can make change. If someone's not there emotionally, they're never going to get out of this homeless situation, right? It sounds like a theoretical paper that you would write. Yes, it makes sense, but is it actually going to work? So everybody that I would talk to about doing this, right? I want to like make this my job. Like I want to do this full time. I mean, everybody thought I was being silly, right? My mom, how are you going to pay your bills? Like what, you know, how are you going to, what about retirement and healthcare? Very good questions, right? I get it. My dad, ironically enough, concerned for my safety. You know, my mentors, people I look for in Philly, you know, I didn't have any savings. I had no money put away. I was 26, right? I didn't have a whole lot. And I realized that I wasn't going to get validation from anybody, from my friends, anybody else. People thought I was really being stupid, and that like, oh my God, I hope Ann actually doesn't go through with this. She has this amazing job waiting for her. Like, grow up, and everybody else has to get a job, like grow up. So I realized that I had to go out on that limb for the first time in my life in a real way, right? And I had to ask myself 3 questions. What if I am doing enough, right? I'm running with these guys when I can, and you know, what if that is enough? But why don't I just grow up and take this job and go to work at Comcast and help out when I can, right? I know myself well enough to know that that wasn't going to be an option for me. I'd always be wondering in the back of my mind, like what would have happened to those guys and everybody else I think that could have benefited from a real shot at this. So, well, right, that one's off the table. The second one was, what if everybody's right? What if these guys quit? What if I like publicly stand up and make a statement that this is the right thing to do and I'm going to give it everything I got? And what if it doesn't work? What if I fail, right? What if I'm left with nothing, no job, and a very bruised ego? That's worst case scenario. I'm a smart girl. Thought I would be able to get a new job or a different job, and I also thought that I would be able to recover emotionally if that didn't work out. So because worst case scenario is I'm okay with, right? I've accepted that that's a possibility. Now the big question was, well, what if it actually works? What if it actually works that we can change these guys' lives by changing their identity? And that question still like gives me goosebumps, right? Like the idea of it, of really making an impact and making change. And I felt it because secondly, on top of this vision and everything else, you know, my personal life is finally getting a ridiculous amount of clarity. For 10 years, there was no good that came out of my dad's addiction, right? It ripped apart my family. It caused me so much question and doubt in my life and having to redefine my life and a lot of loneliness, a lot of resentment and hatred. There was nothing good that came from it. And now to realize that because of my dad's struggles, because of his addiction, because of all that stuff is why I became a runner. Because of my dad is why I felt any connection to these guys. I'm sorry, when your life starts to make sense like that, you start to like look up at the sky and like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. I get it. And I called Comcast and thanked them for the 5 weeks, and told them I had to, see if I could make my purpose turn into my livelihood. So I surrounded myself with people who are much smarter than me, and we started building and growing and learning and listening and screwing up so much, right? I don't know what I'm doing. I've never built an organization before, and I have zero experience with homelessness. Wasn't my background. So we screwed up a ton, and then we screwed up some more, and created this vision. We stayed true to the vision about building something that would be, again, starting with emotional transformation, but have real programming behind it. And 6 years later, as of last year, the organization had grown to a $6.5 million annual budget with 48 full-time staff, chapters in 11 cities across the country, helping thousands of people literally get back to work. We have a retention rate of 48% of moving people from a state of dependence into a state of independence, whether it's having a job, having a home, or being back in school. Like, it was actually working, right? Like, it was amazing to see over and over again the success stories, and mind you, there was plenty of failures along the way, right? Stories that, you wouldn't believe, me letting some of the guys stay at my place, taking my car, getting shit-faced, driving, me finding beer cans in there, members stealing from the organization, me having to throw a member in jail because it was the best place for him, all the ups and downs that come with addiction and that kind of emotional experience. But in the end, it was working. And last December, or not this December, but the one before in 2012, I started to feel like I want something else, right? I started to feel like maybe Back on My Feet is my first chapter. Maybe I want to start doing something else. I started to feel myself get hungry again, and I was like, what the hell? I already did this, right? I already took my big chance. I already took the big first step, and why am I feeling like I want something else? I felt really selfish. Here my life is so purposeful. I get to help people every single day. I am pretty much my own boss, and I'm saying it's not enough anymore. Like, that can't be right. I must just not be working hard enough. I need to actually make this bigger and better and build more and open more chapters and create more programming, and so I started doing that. I worked harder and faster and made everybody else around me, my team, work harder and faster. Well, then people started to quit, right? 2 of my main people that had been with me for a long time quit. And their response was, and every time we tell you that this is so much, you just keep telling us it's a busy time of year. It's fine, right? Let's just keep pushing. You can't build an organization and build a movement 9 to 5, you guys. This is an everyday thing all the time. And so I just told them that they really weren't cut out for this. They must, they should go find, obviously not so harsh, but they should probably go find something with more structure where they don't have to work on weekends. But that's not, what this is about. We are trying to save people's lives and build a movement here. Well, then somebody else quit, and she was my number 2 person forever. And when she quit, I had to take a hard look at myself, right? And say, could I actually be the problem? No way, I'm the founder. No, it's not me, it's everybody else, right? Everybody else isn't doing enough, and I'm the one who's just as committed. They don't understand because this is my organization, and I built this, and I know what it takes to really give it what it needs, right? This is my baby. And I realized that I had overstayed my welcome at Back on My Feet for about 6 months because it was my ego that started to drive the decision making and started to drive, all of the things that I like to do. Back on My Feet made me feel really special, right? Every time someone would meet me, they'd be like, oh my God, have you met Ann? She's so amazing. You should hear about this thing she did. Can you tell them about Back on My Feet? Have you met Ann? She's so amazing. She's so amazing. She's so amazing. That was the conversation all the time. And it made me feel really special. And so starting to think that I would start to do something else, that was the first thing that I thought about. Well, if I'm not the CEO of Back on My Feet, then how am I supposed to feel special? That's who I am. People don't know where it stops and ends. And how am I going to top that? And am I going to be good enough? Are people still going to, again, think that I'm so amazing if I don't have this, if I'm not running this and building this? And that was really scary, right? Like, think about all the things in our life that we don't do because we're so attached to our identity, that it's so scary to think about not being in that relationship, right? Even though it's okay, it's comfortable, it's not 100%, but I'd rather just stay in it than experience something that is unknown and I'm not really sure how it's gonna go. I'd rather take that than be lonely. Or what if this really is the best that I can do? I don't really wanna take that risk. Or that job, right? Like, how many of you or your friends have you heard, like, I hate my job, I wanna quit my job all the time, right? But they never do it. Why don't you do it? Because there is this level of comfort or security around the identity that you've built for yourself that it's very difficult to let that go, because the unknown is the unknown, and it's unfamiliar and it's scary. And I was in that place for months of knowing I needed to let go of my baby, that I wasn't the right mom to like lead this organization anymore, and saying that out loud without feeling like a failure, without feeling like I'm quitting, without feeling like I'm abandoning something that I worked so hard to get people excited about, and now I'm saying this isn't good enough for me anymore, or that it's time for me to move on. It's a really emotional process for me to understand and feel good and comfortable about that. And so last August is when I finally got enough guts to step down as the CEO, and the plan was to start a for-profit company here in DC. And I was so excited about doing that. However, when I told people and made the announcement that, I'm leaving the organization, everybody was like, oh, you must be moving to Africa to save all the children. And I was like, I'm starting a high-end fitness boutique in DC. Oh. Well, good luck with that. That was the response. I could feel the disappointment in people of their expectations of me and who I was to them and what I was supposed to do with my life. And I would find myself saying, but I'm still going to be heavily involved with Back on My Feet. I'm still the founder. I'll be doing all kinds of things and fundraising and, helping out and staying really involved, right? I felt like they needed me to say that to them. And I stopped doing that, obviously, after a couple months, because no one else gets to decide my life and what it is that I'm going to do. And this was another big risk for me, right? Same thing, fitness industry, opening up. It's really risky to get involved in that business and taking out a lease and doing all of these things, investing all the money that I had saved into something. And of course, you think about, what if it doesn't work, right? What if it doesn't work? Everybody asks we ask ourselves that all the time. And we talk ourselves out of things because of that. We almost rationalize, like, it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible to quit my job. It's irresponsible to take all the money I have, invest in something, because what am I left with if it doesn't work? Well, there's like a little piece of information that we all forget, and that's we don't live in a video game, right? If something doesn't work out the way that we thought, we get to choose again. We don't have a limited number of decisions we get to make about our life, and that's the number one thing that scares all of us. What if it doesn't work out? We feel like, okay, cool, then I just have to stay here and I can't move again, and this is gonna be my life. I don't get to go left or go right. And that can be a really paralyzing thing when we build so much security and comfort in our own lives, in our jobs, friendships, relationships, and we're trained to do that, right? Think about our parents. They tell us all the time, get a job, work up the ladder, put savings away, do all these things. Security is what we shoot for. That's what makes us feel comfortable. But that same comfort robs us of our potential to do daring and bold things. It's very contradictory in terms of how to live our life and how we're going to be thirsty and become creative and make big things, right? Big rewards, make big risks. But why is that so hard for us? And it's the identity portion of it, and it's the fear of not being able to pivot once we make a decision. And if we choose wrong, we forget that we can choose again. So Solid Core for me has been an amazing experience, right? The first studio opened in November, and I know how to build and grow things. It's what I do really well. I'm not a great operator, as my VP of operations knows. Thank God she loves spreadsheets so much. But that's not what I do. And my ability or my talent in being able to take an experiential brand and just keep growing it. I've had my lawyer on the phone, Ann, are you sure you want to keep growing and building? Are you sure you want to, open another studio? By February, there will be 7 studios open within the first 14 months of the organization. There'll be 4 different companies with 7 10-year commercial leases, right? It's a risky thing. What if one doesn't work out, or what if there's a crisis, or what if we get bad PR, or somebody dies in the studio? Like, you think about all of that stuff and how you're gonna work, whatever. Like, it's possible, right? I mean, it's hard workout. But all of those things cross your mind, and I have learned for myself to overcome, and it's not that you don't fear failure, but you learn that, like, if you think about those things all the time on the what if it doesn't work, you're gonna stay marinating in your current life, and you're never gonna move. And I find comfort in thinking, I'm no different than anybody else, right? Everybody else has these thoughts too. You just have to make a choice about them. How are you going to move forward? Are you gonna choose to say, failure is an option, yes, but I'm not going to choose that. I'm choosing this, and I'm going to figure out a way to make it work. And if you put yourself in a place where you're not comfortable, right? It's very difficult to like find a new job when you're sitting in your current job, making good money, getting 10 or 8 weeks of vacation, and like there's no motivator there. You have to be willing to put yourself in a place where you're really hungry and starving, and it's almost survival to make it work. So those are the lessons that I have learned about failure in my life, and again, really focusing on the identity piece, because that was huge for me of, who I am without X, and am I going to feel special and amazing enough? And if something doesn't work out, how's that going to impact your reputation? What are people going to think of you? All those things are very real, and I'm not saying that, again, you guys should not be afraid of failure, or that you shouldn't say that failure is not an option. It's an option for everybody, but that's kind of the comfort in it, right? All of us have the ability to succeed and to fail, and so there should feel something that you're not on like this island by yourself, and that it works out for everybody else, but it's not going to work out for you.